r/AskReddit. Which propaganda effort was so successful, people still believe it today? Many Korean people believe that fans can cause death. Even my mother, who moved to America in her mid-teens, still prohibits me from leaving a fan on overnight for fear of death. There is a conspiracy theory that the South Korean government spread this myth as propaganda to prevent energy overusage, but its origins are unknown. It's strange that many Koreans believe this myth considering it is one of the most technologically advanced countries. I've heard also that some suicides are covered up by the police reporting that a fan was left on and blaming it on that, publicly at least. Not sure how true that is. I've heard that as well. Though it should be noted a lot of post-war Korean homes were heated by small furnaces with exhaust flues going under the floor, which is why most modern Korean homes have heated floors. The problem being that the furnaces were coal-fired and any leak would result in a deadly carbon monoxide or dioxide, can't remember right now, leak into the home which may have fueled the fan death myth. Carrots make your vision better. This rumor was started in WW2 to hide the invention of radar. The public was told that Allied pilots found the German bombers during the Blitz because they had good eyesight, because they ate their carrots. But in reality it was that the British had an early radar system in place that they did not want the Germans to find out about and bomb. Columbus was the only person who believed the world was round. Literally everyone who could read knew that the earth was round. Nobody thought Columbus would fall off the edge. They thought his crew would starve to death before reaching the East Indies, and he totally would have. Columbus was lucky that there was a new continent where he thought Asia was. That Napoleon Bonaparte was short. He was 5 feet and 7 inches tall, which might be a little bit on the shorter side by modern standards, but it was around the average height for people back then. The idea that he was short actually came from a British propaganda campaign to mock him. The French measurement of a foot was equivalent to 13 of today's inches, so at 5 feet he was actually 5 or slightly above. The cheeky Brits knew this. That touching a baby bad will make its mother eject it. Lies. Put the baby back in the nest if Tao can. But don't touch baby rabbits. I watched my pet mama rabbit eat all her babies one by one after we handled them. Well, I didn't watch it, but they disappeared pretty fast and my parents were horrified trying to keep the blood cleaned up so my 7-year-old self wouldn't see the gore. Side note, kids are smart. Just be honest with them. I knew what was happening. Oddly enough, that doesn't really apply to wild rabbit, at least not cottontails and swamp rabbits we have here. But I have heard it about domestic breeds. It's found in small domestic mammals most often, but similar violent behaviors have been found in humans as well, and it's a vitamin B3 deficiency. Small mammals such as hamsters, who are infamous for eating their young in captivity, and rabbits often have diets that are high in corn. Corn has no vitamin B3, and it can cause aggressive behaviors. Animals in the wild do not do this. The war on drugs. Prematurely illegalized drugs we didn't understand and hadn't had the chance to do a lot of research on, psychedelics and weed, mainly, and created a black hole of misinformation and mistrust by the public, as well as removed funding for drugs that now, thanks to private funding, we are realizing can have hugely positive effects when dealing with mental health. Left out that the war on drugs targeted communities of color, which I'm sure led to the growing tension between police and those respective communities today. Not just targeted either. The Nixon government, and those coming after it, would go as far as selling drugs to those communities just to arrest them, contributing their labor to the prison industrial complex. They increased supplies of opioids and more harmful drugs to poor and minority communities, to give them a worse reputation and turn public opinion of non-drug users, but especially middle-class white people, against them. The atrocities go on and on. That monosodium glutamate, MSG, is harmful. If such analogy were ever possible, it has never been proven. You'd literally die, because it means you're either allergic to sodium or glutamate, which are in almost every single food or drink known to man. That Listerine invented the term halitosis for bad breath. They didn't. It predates them by decades. It's just something that sounds nice to say, because you get to attack a big corporation. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean floor. In truth, this was a technically true but misleading factoid made up by someone in the US Navy who was tired of the Apollo program getting so much money and wanted a piece of the action. It was so successful that I've never been able to re-find the name of the official. Now almost every time someone's talking about how mysterious and unknown the deep ocean is, we get this old cliche. The firebombing of Dresden. Nazi propaganda claimed that Dresden was a cultural city with no strategic significance. This is false, and they gave grossly inflated casualty numbers. Nazi propaganda at the time claimed that there were 200,000 casualties. The real numbers are between 22,700 and 25,000 deaths. One of the most famous false casualty totals comes from Slaughterhouse 5, which uses 135,000 casualties. This figure was taken from the destruction of Dresden by David Irving, who at times has suggested up to 250,000 casualties. David Irving is a Holocaust denier BTW, though it was unknown during that time. It's quite shocking how many people still believe actual Nazi propaganda. Edit. There are some who are curious if Dresden is considered a war crime. I think this misses the point. The bombing of Dresden was used by Nazi propaganda and neo-Nazis to draw a sort of moral equivalence between the Western Allies and Nazi Germany. While there is debate on whether or not it's considered a war crime, always keep that reasoning in the back of your head. I myself stand in the not a war crime camp because there were legitimate military targets in the city, and Dresden was not treated any more severely than other cities by the Western Allies. That Taco Bell sells grade D meat, or that their ground beef is equivalent to dog food. In the last few years, Taco Bell has quickly become one of the healthiest fast food chains, being one of the first to completely ban artificial ingredients. The comparison to dog food is ridiculous, as most commercial dog foods contain protein meal/byproduct composed of the leftover and diseased parts of old/dying animals. TL. Doctor eat Taco Bell. That a man should spend 2 months' salary for his future wife's wedding ring, which absolutely must be a diamond. Screw that. I spent a total of $150 for my wife's ring and she fucking loves it, and it's a sapphire. Diamonds are no more precious than any other precious gem, and manufactured gems are way easier to come by, are more perfect, and so much cheaper. As long as it's an actual ruby/sapphire/emerald/etc, it will be just as good as one dug out of the ground. Fake ones are good for a teen gift or just friends kind of gift, but they'll shatter pretty easy compared to the real thing. British have bad teeth. They pretty low number of cavities. It's just that in US has high standards of what are good teeth, completely white, bleached etc, while elsewhere standards of what are good looking teeth is lower. German generals opposed Hitler's ideas on how to conduct war, mostly due to post-war self-serving and apologetic memoirs. Objective analysis shows they were okay with what they later claimed were idiotic offensives. German war technology in WW2 was superior. Some was, but bulk was obsolescent because Germany simply couldn't make jump to next generation. For example, while Wallace fielded next generations of propeller planes, P-51 for example, Germany was still using pre/early war Me-109 simply because next generation had development and production problems. Harping on the fact that France sold exocet missiles to Argentina, which is true, but ignores the fact that during the war Argentina deployed mix of US, Israeli and even British weapons. That standardized tests are the best way to check if a student understands material/hits the average. IQ tests were created to specifically cut out anyone who was not rich. You can actually study to get a higher score on an IQ test, which is not what is supposed to happen. It is supposed to be your inherent merit that is tested, not if you could buy study materials. Speaking of which, the SAT, ACT, and other tests are run by companies that create the textbooks you use to study for those tests. Did the tests come from a need to see if students knew enough? Some nations outside of the United States exclude students below a certain average and/or cut them out of the school system entirely. The United States requires all students to take standardized tests unless they are unenrolled from school. If you test based on income level, there are states in the USA that score higher than anywhere else in the world. Because the USA scores lower, they try to create incentives for schools to score better. If they do not, they get their funding cut, which means students have less time to study, leading to students being taught to the test. There are now students entering college who are illiterate because their schools only taught the test and not critical thinking skills. The education systems in most countries suspiciously look like they are purpose-built to create a small elite of high education / high earnings / high power individuals and weed out anyone else along the way. In my country, kids who perform worst during the first few years of school get forced into a lesser education track, where the schools are super underfunded. No one cares about any of the social issues that the kids bring into school, being mostly kids from the poorest families, and this education track ends literally years earlier than the highest track, with practically no path to ever getting to a point where these kids will be allowed into a university. It's almost like this is designed to create cheap, undereducated laborers. I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.